The dust cloud from the approaching stagecoach was visible long before the vehicle itself, a mirage of hope shimmering across the parched horizon of southeastern Colorado. Beatrice Calloway clutched her worn leather satchel to her chest, the letter inside it now creased from countless readings containing promises of a new life with a man she'd never met. The September sun of 1878 beat down mercilessly on Lavetta's small wooden depot platform as she stood alone, the only passenger who had disembarked at this remote stop. Last call for westbound passengers. The driver's announcement jolted Beatrice from her thoughts. The stagecoach would continue onward in minutes, leaving her behind in this unfamiliar town, where someone named Harold Fitzgerald was supposed to meet her, a man who had responded to her advertisement in the matrimonial news, a man who had promised to make her his wife. But Harold was nowhere to be seen. "Excuse me, sir," Beatrice approached the station clerk, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose. "I'm waiting for Mr. Harold Fitzgerald. Has he left any messages?" The clerk's eyes widened slightly. "Fitzgerald? Madam, I'm afraid." He hesitated, shuffling papers awkwardly. "Mr. Fitzgerald left town 3 weeks ago. Word is he struck gold in Nevada and departed rather suddenly." The blood drained from Beatrice's face. 3 weeks. Nevada. The implications crashed over her like a wave. She had traveled 1,500 miles from Boston to marry a man who hadn't even bothered to send word that he'd abandoned their arrangement. "I see." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. 22 years old, nearly penniless, and stranded in a frontier town where she knew not a soul. "Madam, you all right?" The clerk's concerned voice barely registered as she staggered back, bumping into something solid. "No, someone. Careful there." Strong hands steadied her shoulders, the voice deep and tinged with a western drawl. Beatrice turned to face a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer storm. His dark hair was partially hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, and despite the dust on his clothes, there was something immediately striking about him. She struggled to find words. "It seems I've been left at the depot." The stranger's expression shifted from curiosity to understanding. "Mail-order bride?" he asked, not unkindly. Pride made her chin lift slightly. "Yes, though apparently my intended had other intentions." Something passed across his face, sympathy, perhaps, or recognition. He removed his hat, revealing a full head of dark hair with just a touch of auburn when the sunlight caught it. "Russell Nichols," he said, extending a calloused hand. "Seems to me, Miss Calloway, Beatrice Calloway. Seems to me, Miss Calloway, that you were meant to meet me instead." The directness of his statement caught her off guard. "I beg your pardon." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "What I mean is, fate has a funny way of working things out. I own the Double N Ranch about 8 miles outside town. My sister Amelia runs the boarding house here in Lavetta. If you need a place to stay while you figure things out, she'd be happy to have you." Beatrice hesitated. The practical part of her mind, the part that had gotten her this far in life, assessed her options. She had exactly $4.72 to her name, enough for perhaps 2 nights at a hotel, if such a place even existed here. Her teaching position in Boston had barely covered her living expenses, and it had taken all her savings to make this journey west. "That's very kind, Mr. Nichols, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition. Amelia's always complaining about needing help with the place." He gestured to her bag. "Is this all your luggage?" "My trunk should be coming from the baggage car," she replied, then felt a fresh wave of despair. "Though I'm not certain I can afford to stay long enough to need it." Russell Nichols looked at her thoughtfully. "The school in town's been looking for a teacher. Last one left when winter hit last year, couldn't handle the cold. You mentioned you taught in Boston." Beatrice nodded, surprised. "How did you know?" "Your speech patterns. And you're carrying a book of Shakespeare's sonnets that's been well read." He nodded toward the volume peeking from her satchel. Most ladies traveling west bring romance novels, not classics. She felt herself blush slightly at his observation. Yes, I taught for 3 years at a girls' academy. Literature primarily, though I'm versed in mathematics and natural sciences as well. Well then, Russell said, seems Lavetta might have just gained what it needed most. Let me help with your trunk and we'll get you settled at Amelia's. As they waited for her trunk to be unloaded, Beatrice studied Russell Nichols more carefully. He wasn't conventionally handsome like the suitors her mother had once tried to arrange for her in Boston. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with small lines around his eyes suggesting he smiled often. His hands were those of a working man, but there was nothing rough about his manner. "Mr. Nichols," she ventured, "why are you helping me? You don't know me at all." He considered her question for a moment before answering. "My mother came west as a mail-order bride in '52. Her intended died of cholera before she arrived. A stranger helped her, gave her a job cooking at her ranch. She met my father there." He shrugged. "I suppose I'm just passing on the kindness." The simplicity of his explanation touched something in Beatrice. In Boston, such generosity would have been suspect, wrapped in social obligations and expectations. Here, it seemed, kindness could exist for its own sake. "There it is," Russell pointed as a porter wheeled out a large trunk. "That yours?" "Yes, that's mine." She moved to help, but Russell was already lifting it with ease. "We'll take my wagon," he said. "Amelia's place is just down the main street." As they walked away from the depot, Beatrice couldn't help glancing back at the stagecoach that had brought her here. It was already pulling away, heading further west, just as Harold Fitzgerald had done. She had planned this journey for months, sold nearly everything she owned, and severed ties with what little family she had left in Boston, all for a future that had evaporated like morning dew under the harsh western sun. Yet walking beside this quiet, thoughtful cowboy, she felt an unexpected sensation, not security, exactly, but possibility. Lavetta might not have been her intended destination, but perhaps it was where she needed to be. The boarding house was a 2-story structure of weathered wood with a wide front porch and clean windows, a stark contrast to some of the other buildings they passed. A painted sign reading "Nichols Boarding House" hung above the door. "Amelia," Russell called as they entered. "We've got a guest." A woman with the same storm-gray eyes as Russell emerged from what appeared to be a kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical bun, but a few strands had escaped, giving her a slightly harried appearance. "Russell, I wasn't expecting you until—" She stopped when she noticed Beatrice. "Oh, hello there. Amelia, this is Miss Beatrice Calloway. Miss Calloway, my sister Amelia Nichols." "Pleased to meet you," Beatrice said, extending her hand. "Likewise," Amelia replied, her handshake firm and warm. "What brings you to our little corner of Colorado?" Before Beatrice could answer, Russell explained. Miss Calloway was expecting to be met by Harold Fitzgerald. Amelia's expression immediately shifted to one of understanding mixed with indignation. "That no good." "Excuse my language, Miss Calloway, but that man has a lot to answer for. Lit out in the middle of the night, owing money all over town." She shook her head. "You're not the first he's disappointed, I'm afraid." Beatrice felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. "I see I should have been more cautious in my correspondence." "Nonsense," Amelia said firmly. "You couldn't have known. Men like Fitzgerald are practiced deceivers." She shot a look at her brother. "Unlike some men around here who are just plainly terrible at talking to women altogether." Russell rolled his eyes at his sister's teasing. "I'll leave you ladies to get acquainted. Miss Calloway, I'll speak to Mayor Patterson about the teaching position tomorrow morning." "Thank you, Mr. Nichols. I'm in your debt." Something flickered in his eyes. "Not at all. Just doing what needs doing." He nodded to both women. "Amelia, I'll bring those supplies by tomorrow. After Russell left, Amelia showed Beatrice to a small but clean room on the second floor. "It's not fancy, but it's quiet and the bed is comfortable." "It's lovely," Beatrice said sincerely. After weeks of travel, sleeping in stage coaches and crowded way stations, the simple room with its patchwork quilt and curtained window seemed like luxury. "Dinner's at 6, Amelia said. "Rest up until then. You look like you could use it." Left alone, Beatrice sank onto the bed, emotions finally catching up with her. The tears came suddenly, tears of disappointment, exhaustion, and fear. What if there was no teaching position? What if she couldn't earn her keep in this town? What if she had made the most terrible mistake of her life? Yet even as these thoughts swirled, she remembered Russell Nichols' words at the depot. "You were meant to meet me instead." There had been no romantic intention behind them, she was sure, merely a kind man offering assistance to a stranger in distress. Still, the idea that fate might have other plans for her than those she had carefully arranged was strangely comforting. Beatrice washed her face in the basin provided, changed into a clean dress, and braided her long chestnut hair. By the time she descended for dinner, she had composed herself into the proper young woman she'd been raised to be: adaptable, practical, and determined to make the best of her circumstances. The dining room held 3 other boarders: an elderly gentleman who introduced himself as Dr. Samuel Winters, the town's physician, a young woman named Flora Jenkins who worked at the general store, and a quiet man in his 30s named Thomas Burke, who managed the town's small bank. "We're usually a larger group," Amelia explained as she served a hearty stew with fresh bread. "But with harvest season, many of our regulars are helping at the outlying farms." The conversation flowed easily, with the others politely inquiring about Beatrice's journey and offering information about La Veta. She learned that the town had grown substantially since the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad had established a route through the area 5 years earlier, though it remained modest compared to larger settlements like Pueblo or Denver. "We've been desperate for a proper teacher," Dr. Winters told her. "The children are running wild as jackrabbits, my grandson included." "I'd be grateful for the opportunity," Beatrice said. "Though I should warn you, my methods might be considered progressive by some. I believe education should encourage critical thinking, not just rote memorization." "Sounds exactly like what these children need," Flora said approvingly. "Most haven't had consistent schooling for nearly a year." After dinner, Beatrice helped Amelia with the dishes despite the older woman's protests. "I insist," Beatrice said. "It's the least I can do for your kindness." As they worked side by side, Amelia studied her. "You're not what I expected." "Oh, and what did you expect?" "When Russell said he'd found a mail-order bride abandoned at the depot, I pictured someone more." She hesitated. "Desperate, fragile," Beatrice suggested with a small smile. "Perhaps. But you've got a steadiness about you, an intelligence." Amelia handed her another plate to dry. "My brother noticed it right away." Beatrice felt an unexpected warmth at this observation. "Your brother seems very kind." "He is, too kind sometimes, takes on everyone's troubles." Amelia sighed. "Runs himself ragged with that ranch, helping neighbors, serving on the town council. Never takes time for himself." "He mentioned your mother was a mail-order bride," Beatrice ventured. Amelia's expression softened. "She was. Came from Philadelphia with dreams of adventure and a trousseau full of completely impractical clothes." She laughed softly. "By the time I came along, she'd turned into a proper rancher's wife, could shoot as straight as any man and make a meal out of practically nothing during hard times." "She sounds remarkable." She was. Sadness briefly shadowed Amelia's features. "We lost her and Pa both to influenza 8 years ago. Russell was 24, had to take over the ranch and look after me until I married." "You're widowed?" Beatrice asked gently, noting the band of gold on Amelia's finger. Amelia nodded. James died in a mining accident 3 years ago. We'd been married just 2 years. She shook herself slightly. After that, I couldn't bear the emptiness of the ranch house. Russell helped me buy this place. Keeps me busy, which is what I needed. The vulnerability in Amelia's confession made Beatrice feel less alone. Everyone carried sorrows, it seemed. I lost my parents to typhoid when I was 16, she offered in return. My aunt raised me, but she made it clear it was obligation, not affection, that motivated her charity. Amelia reached out and squeezed her hand. Well, you're here now, and between us, I think Lavetta might be just what you need and vice versa. That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Beatrice thought about Russell Nichols and his quiet strength. There was something compelling about him, something that made her curious to know more. It wasn't romantic interest, she told herself firmly. Merely appreciation for his kindness, and perhaps a natural human curiosity about someone who had shown her such unexpected assistance. Yet when sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and a deep voice saying, "You were meant to meet me instead." The next morning brought clear skies and a sense of purpose. Beatrice dressed carefully in her most professional attire, a navy blue skirt and matching jacket over a crisp white blouse. She arranged her hair in a simple yet dignified style and descended to find Amelia already bustling about the kitchen. "Good morning. Sleep well." Amelia handed her a cup of strong coffee. "Better than I have in weeks," Beatrice admitted. "Is there anything I can help with before I meet with the mayor?" "Not a thing. Russell's coming by to take you to the town hall." Amelia gestured to the window. "In fact, I believe that's him now." Russell Nichols was tying his horse to the hitching post outside, looking considerably more polished than he had the previous day. He'd traded his work clothes for clean trousers, a pressed shirt, and a vest. His hat was the same, but his boots had been brushed free of dust. Beatrice felt an inexplicable flutter in her stomach. Nerves about the teaching position, she told herself firmly. "Good morning, ladies," Russell greeted them as he entered. "Miss Calloway, I spoke with Mayor Patterson first thing. He's eager to meet you." "Thank you, Mr. Nichols." Beatrice took a final sip of coffee. "I'm ready whenever you are." Lavetta in daylight revealed itself to be a town of modest but growing prosperity. The main street boasted a general store, a bank, a small hotel, a couple of saloons, and various other establishments. People nodded greetings to Russell as they passed, many openly curious about his companion. "Word travels fast in small towns," he explained, noticing her awareness of the attention. "By nightfall, everyone will know about the new school teacher." "I haven't secured the position yet," she reminded him, his lips quirked in a half-smile. "Trust me, unless you tell the mayor you plan to teach the children to worship the devil, the job is yours. He's desperate." The town hall was a relatively new building, with an American flag hanging proudly out front. Inside, Mayor Augustus Patterson proved to be a portly, enthusiastic man with a magnificent mustache and an even more impressive ability to talk without seeming to draw breath. "Miss Calloway." "A pleasure indeed. Russell here tells me you're a Boston-educated teacher, precisely what our growing community requires." The school building is modest but sound. 28 pupils at last count, ages 6 to 16, some quite bright, others in desperate need of civilizing influence. Previous teacher fled after Jonas Miller put a garden snake in her desk drawer, but I'm sure you'll manage splendidly. Beatrice blinked, trying to process this torrent of information. "I'd be delighted to meet the children and see the schoolhouse, Mayor Patterson. Today, right now, Russell, you'll show her the way." The mayor was already shuffling through papers. "Salary is $40 monthly. Room and board included small cottage behind the school. Nothing fancy but recently repaired roof. No leaks term begins Monday next, giving you time to prepare." Before she quite knew what was happening, Beatrice found herself hired, with a contract signed and a small advance on her first month's salary in her reticule. That was. She began as they left the town hall. Hurricane Patterson, Russell supplied with a chuckle. Good man, means well, talks enough for 3 people. Is the snake story true? She asked as they walked toward the schoolhouse at the edge of town. Afraid so. Jonas is a handful but not malicious, just needs firm guidance and plenty to occupy his mind. The schoolhouse was a simple one-room building with rows of benches and desks, a large slate board at the front, and bookshelves that appeared disappointingly sparse. The teacher's cottage behind it was equally basic, one main room serving as kitchen and living area, a small bedroom and a tiny washroom. But both buildings were clean, sturdy, and represented something Beatrice hadn't dared hope for: independence. It's perfect, she said, meaning it. Russell looked skeptical. It's awfully small. It's mine, she replied simply. Or it will be once I've proven myself. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You weren't just looking for a husband when you answered Fitzgerald's advertisement, were you? You were looking for a fresh start. His perception startled her. Yes, teaching positions for women in Boston are becoming scarce, and the pay is barely enough to survive on, I thought. She trailed off, embarrassed by her naivety. You thought marriage to a stranger might offer more security than continuing to struggle alone, he finished for her. There was no judgment in his tone, only comprehension. Beatrice nodded. Foolish, I suppose. Not foolish. Brave. His gaze held hers. Takes courage to leave everything familiar behind for an uncertain future. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits. Both had shouldered responsibilities young, both had faced loss, both understood the weight of duty and the value of independence. The moment was broken by the arrival of a young boy, perhaps 10 years old, who skidded to a halt when he saw them in the schoolhouse. Uncle Russell, is this the new teacher? The boy had the same gray eyes as the Nichols siblings, though his hair was a lighter brown. Indeed it is, Russell confirmed. Miss Calloway, this is my nephew, William Jenkins. Amelia's son, Beatrice asked, surprised. My stepson, Russell clarified. James was a widower when Amelia married him. Will, mind your manners now. The boy straightened and offered a small bow. Pleased to meet you, madam. Are you really from Boston? Have you seen the ocean? Will you teach us about ships and whales and pirates? Beatrice couldn't help laughing at his enthusiasm. Yes to all of those questions, though I think we'll need to focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic as well. Will's face fell slightly. Those are boring. Only if taught boringly, she replied with a wink. I promise we'll make learning an adventure. The boy's face lit up. I'll tell the others. And with that he was off, running back toward town as if carrying the most important news in the world. You've made a friend for life, Russell observed, smiling. Will's mad for adventure stories. Wants to be a sea captain someday, despite having never seen a body of water larger than the lake north of town. Dreams are important, Beatrice said. They carry us through difficult times. Russell studied her. And what are your dreams, Miss Calloway? The directness of his question caught her off guard. In Boston, such personal inquiries would have been considered presumptuous. But here, under the vast Colorado sky, conventional social rules seemed as distant as the eastern seaboard. To make a difference, she answered honestly. To build something meaningful with my life. She hesitated, then added, and to find a place where I truly belong. His eyes softened. Worthy dreams, all 3. They walked back toward town in companionable silence. At the boarding house, Russell surprised her by saying, I'd like to invite you to dinner at the ranch this Sunday. Amelia comes out with Will, and it would give you a chance to see more of the area before school starts. I'd like that very much, Beatrice replied, perhaps too quickly. His smile reached his eyes. Good. I'll come by around noon. He tipped his hat and was gone, leaving Beatrice to wonder at the fluttering sensation his invitation had caused. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Beatrice moved her belongings to the teacher's cottage, spent hours organizing the schoolroom, and began creating lesson plans. The school's book collection was indeed pitiful, but when she mentioned this to Amelia, word spread through town. Soon, residents began appearing at her door with donations: dog-eared novels, outdated encyclopedias, books of poetry, and even a complete set of Shakespeare, That Doctor. Winters insisted he no longer had room for. By Saturday evening, Beatrice had transformed the schoolhouse from a neglected space into a welcoming environment for learning. She'd created a reading corner with cushions, hung maps on the walls, and organized the books by subject. The cottage, too, had become homey with the addition of the quilt Amelia had insisted she take, and wildflowers gathered from nearby fields. As she prepared for bed, Beatrice realized with some surprise that she hadn't thought of Harold Fitzgerald or her abandoned matrimonial plans all day. Instead, her thoughts had been occupied with curriculum planning, ideas for engaging her students, and, if she were honest with herself, anticipation of tomorrow's visit to the Nichols Ranch. It's merely gratitude and friendship, she told her reflection firmly as she brushed her hair. Nothing more. But even as she said it, she knew she was lying to herself. There was something about Russell Nichols that drew her: his quiet strength, his thoughtfulness, the way his eyes crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled. It was too soon for such feelings, she knew. She'd been in La Veta less than a week, yet she couldn't deny the quickening of her pulse when she thought of seeing him again. Sunday dawned clear and warm for late September. Beatrice chose a sage green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, and pinned her hair in a softer style than her usual teaching arrangement. She told herself it was because this was a social occasion, not because she hoped Russell would notice. He arrived precisely at noon, driving a wagon rather than riding horseback. Will was already with him, bouncing excitedly on the seat. "Miss Calloway, wait until you see the ranch. We have horses and cows and chickens, and a dog named General who can fetch anything you throw, and a creek with fish this big." The boy stretched his arms wide, indicating fish of clearly exaggerated proportions. "William," Russell said with fond exasperation, "let Miss Calloway at least get seated before you talk her ear off." Beatrice laughed as Russell helped her up onto the wagon seat. His hand was warm and strong, and she was acutely aware of his proximity as she settled beside him, with Will squeezed in next to her. "I hope you don't mind a somewhat bumpy ride," Russell said as he clicked to the horses. "The road to the ranch isn't the smoothest." "After 2 weeks in a stagecoach, I doubt anything could compare," she assured him. The journey took about 40 minutes, during which Will kept up a steady stream of information about ranch life, local wildlife, and his personal adventures. Beatrice found his enthusiasm infectious and asked questions that delighted the boy with their genuine interest. Occasionally, she caught Russell watching them, an unreadable expression in his gray eyes. Once, their gazes met and held for a moment longer than was strictly proper, causing her cheeks to warm despite the cool mountain breeze. The Double N Ranch came into view as they crested a hill, a sprawling property nestled in a verdant valley with mountains rising majestically in the background. The main house was substantial but unpretentious, built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and in the distance, cattle grazed peacefully in fenced pastures. "It's beautiful," Beatrice said softly. "Been in the family for 25 years, Russell told her. "My father built that house with his own hands, added to it as the family grew." Pride was evident in his voice. Not as grand as some of the big cattle operations further north, but it's home. As they pulled up to the house, a large black and white dog came bounding out, barking joyfully. "General," Will shouted, jumping down from the wagon before it had fully stopped and throwing his arms around the animal. "That boy and that dog," Russell shook his head, smiling. He came around to help Beatrice down, his hands lingering at her waist perhaps a moment longer than necessary. "Welcome to the Double N, Miss Calloway." The interior of the ranch house was a revelation. Beatrice had expected a bachelor's Spartan accommodations, but instead found a home of surprising comfort and refinement. The furnishings were solid and well made, the floors covered with colorful woven rugs, and the walls adorned with paintings of local landscapes. Most surprising were the bookshelves that lined one entire wall of the main room, filled with volumes that ranged from practical agricultural texts to classic literature. "You're a reader," she observed, running her fingers along the spines of the books. "Winter nights are long out here," Russell replied. "Reading passes the time." He hesitated, then added, "My mother insisted on education, had books shipped from Denver, made sure Amelia and I knew Shakespeare as well as we knew cattle breeding." Amelia arrived shortly after them, bringing fresh baked bread and pies. The kitchen already smelled wonderful, with something savory bubbling in a large pot on the stove. "Russell's been cooking since dawn," Amelia told Beatrice with a meaningful look. "Not his usual Sunday fare, I can tell you that." Beatrice felt her cheeks warm at the implication. Had he gone to special trouble for her visit? Dinner was served at the large oak table in the dining room, a hearty beef stew that Russell had indeed prepared, accompanied by Amelia's bread, fresh vegetables from the garden, and sweet cider pressed from apples grown in the small orchard behind the house. The conversation flowed easily, touching on town news, ranching challenges, the upcoming school term, and memories of the elder Nichols that had Will alternately laughing and asking questions about the grandparents he'd never known. After the meal, they moved to the porch where Russell surprised Beatrice by producing a fiddle. "Another way to pass those winter nights," he explained somewhat shyly. "Not professional quality, mind you, but when he began to play, the sweet, haunting melody belied his modest disclaimer." The tune was unfamiliar to Beatrice, but stirred something deep within her, longing, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit in this man, who seemed to contain so many unexpected depths. As the afternoon light began to fade into evening, Russell suggested a short walk to settle the meal. Amelia volunteered to stay behind with Will, who was engaged in a game of fetch with General, giving Beatrice and Russell the opportunity to stroll alone. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, following a well-worn path that led down to a creek gurgling merrily over smooth stones. The setting sun painted the landscape in hues of gold and amber, casting long shadows across the grassy meadow. "Thank you for today," Beatrice said finally. "It's been wonderful." Russell glanced at her, something unspoken in his eyes. "I'm glad you came. The house feels different with you in it." He paused as if weighing his next words carefully. "Livelier, more complete somehow." The simple statement, delivered in his straightforward manner, touched Beatrice deeply. "I felt more at home here in 1 week than I ever did in Boston," she admitted. "It's strange, isn't it? To feel you belong somewhere you've just arrived." They had reached the creek, where a fallen log provided a natural place to sit. The burbling water and distant calls of birds created a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. "Not strange," Russell said, settling beside her at a respectful distance. "My father used to say some people and places are meant to find each other, like puzzle pieces fitting together." "Is that what you meant?" Beatrice asked, gathering her courage. "At the depot when you said I was meant to meet you instead." Russell's gaze met hers, direct and honest, I didn't plan those words, they just came out. He looked down at his hands for a moment, but I've thought about them every day since. Beatrice's heart quickened. As have I. I don't want to presume, he said carefully. You came here expecting one life and found another. You've barely had time to adjust to make your own decisions about what you want. He hesitated. The last thing you need is another man making claims on your future. His consideration touched her deeply. How different he was from Harold Fitzgerald, who had made promises he never intended to keep. Different, too, from the Boston suitors who had seen her only as a potential ornament for their social ambitions. Mr. Nichols Russell, she corrected herself. I came west seeking security, yes, but also something more. Something I couldn't name but felt was missing in my life. She looked out at the land stretching before them, bathed in the golden light of sunset. I believe I've found it here. And what is it you found? His voice was low, almost a whisper. Possibility, she answered simply. The freedom to become who I'm meant to be, not who circumstances forced me to be. Russell nodded, understanding in his eyes. That's what the West offers at its best. A clean slate. Room to grow. And connections that feel real, she added softly. Not bound by social conventions or expectations. Their eyes met again, and Beatrice felt something shift between them, a mutual recognition that transcended their brief acquaintance. Perhaps it was the openness of the landscape around them, or the honest way of living that frontier life demanded. But she felt she knew Russell Nichols better after 1 week than men she'd known in Boston for years. I'd like to court you properly, Miss Calloway Beatrice, he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. With your permission. No hurry, no pressure, just the chance to know each other better. Joy blossomed in Beatrice's chest, unexpected and sweet. I'd like that very much, Russell. His smile then was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual, then brilliant. They sat together as twilight descended, talking of small things and large, discovering common interests and different perspectives, laying the foundation for whatever might grow between them. By the time they returned to the house, stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Amelia took one look at their faces and smiled knowingly, but said nothing beyond. We should head back to town before it gets too dark. The ride back was quieter, Will having exhausted himself with play and now dozing against Beatrice's shoulder. Russell drove with one hand, the other resting on the seat between them. In a moment of boldness, Beatrice placed her hand beside his, their little fingers just touching. It was a small gesture, almost innocent, but the connection sent warmth spreading through her. At the teacher's cottage, Russell helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. Will had been transferred to Amelia's lap, still sleeping soundly. School starts tomorrow, Beatrice said, suddenly shy. I know, you'll be wonderful. Russell's confidence in her was evident. May I call on you Tuesday evening? Perhaps bring some books from the ranch you might enjoy. I'd like that very much. She hesitated, then added impulsively, Thank you for being at the depot that day. His expression softened. Thank you for getting off the stagecoach. In the proper world of Boston, their parting would have been marked by a formal handshake, perhaps. But here, under the vast canopy of stars, Russell bent down and placed the softest of kisses on her cheek, barely a touch. Yet it sent sparks cascading through her. Good night, Beatrice, he whispered. Good night, Russell, she replied, her voice catching slightly. As the wagon pulled away, Beatrice touched her cheek where his lips had been, a smile spreading across her face. Whatever fate had brought her to Lavetta, instead of into Harold Fitzgerald's waiting arms, she was profoundly grateful for it. The first day of school dawned clear and cool, with the distant mountains touched by the first hints of autumn gold. Beatrice arrived early, arranging books and materials, writing a welcome message on the large slate and trying to calm her racing heart. By 8 o'clock, Children began arriving, some eager, others clearly reluctant, all curious about the new teacher from the East. Will Jenkins was among the first, proudly taking a seat in the front row. "I told everyone how nice you are," he informed her, "and how you're going to teach us about pirates and the ocean." Beatrice smiled. Among many other things, yes. As the room filled, she observed the students carefully. They ranged from tiny 6-year-olds with gap-toothed smiles to teenagers on the cusp of adulthood. Their clothing reflected the diverse economic circumstances of the community, some in neat, well-maintained attire, others in patched but clean garments that spoke of limited means but careful attention. At precisely 8:30, Beatrice rang the small bell on her desk. "Good morning, students. I'm Miss Calloway, and I'm delighted to be your new teacher." 28 pairs of eyes regarded her with varying degrees of interest, suspicion, and anticipation. Beatrice launched into the lesson. She had carefully prepared an engaging introduction that combined geography, history, and literature by having the students create maps of the settings from famous stories. By lunchtime, she had learned most of their names and begun to identify the different personalities in her classroom. Jonas Miller, the infamous snake placer, was indeed a spirited boy with quick intelligence that needed channeling. Emily Wilson, a quiet girl of 14, revealed an exceptional talent for drawing. The Sandoval twins, Miguel and Sofia, translated for their younger sister Carmen, who was still learning English but showed remarkable aptitude for mathematics. When school dismissed at 3 o'clock, several parents were waiting outside, curious to meet the teacher who had their children buzzing with excitement about learning. "Miss Calloway, my Jonas hasn't stopped talking about the map he made, Mrs. Miller said, clearly relieved that her son hadn't been singled out for his past misdeeds. "Jonas has a wonderful imagination and energy," Beatrice replied diplomatically. "I'm hoping to direct those qualities toward positive achievements this year." As the crowd dispersed, Beatrice noticed Russell at the edge of the schoolyard, leaning against a fence post. He wasn't watching her directly, instead seeming absorbed in conversation with another rancher, but she felt certain his presence wasn't coincidental. She busied herself cleaning the classroom, heart beating a little faster knowing he was nearby. When the last student had gone and she emerged to lock the schoolhouse door, Russell was walking toward her. "Successful first day?" he asked, his smile warming his eyes. "I believe so," she replied, matching his smile with her own. "No snakes in my desk, which I count as a victory," he chuckled. "Small blessings. The whole town's talking about the new teacher who had Jonas Miller completely engaged for hours. Some are calling it a miracle. Hardly that. Just a matter of finding what interests each child and building on it." She tilted her head. "What brings you to town today?" "Supply run," he said, gesturing to his wagon parked near the general store. "And maybe I wanted to see how your first day went." His honesty was refreshing. "Still all right for me to call tomorrow evening. I'm looking forward to it." Their gazes held for a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Then Russell tipped his hat. "Until tomorrow, then." Beatrice watched him walk away, admiring the straight line of his shoulders and the confident rhythm of his stride. She'd never been one for romantic fantasies, preferring practical realities, yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her chest when Russell Nichols was near. "Miss Calloway." The call came from behind her. Turning, she saw Mayor Patterson hurrying toward her, mustache quivering with excitement. "Spectacular first day by all accounts. Parents already singing your praises." Town Council wants to discuss possibility of expanding school program. Adult education evenings, perhaps. Literature society. Cultural advancement for our growing community. By the time she extracted herself from the mayor's enthusiastic planning, Russell had gone, but the anticipation of seeing him again remained. a warm glow in her heart as she prepared dinner in her small cottage. Tuesday evening arrived with Russell appearing at her door precisely at 7, a stack of books in his arms and General at his heels. The dog immediately made himself at home, flopping down before the small fireplace as if he'd always belonged there. "Hope you don't mind, General," Russell said. "He follows me everywhere." "Not at all. I'm fond of dogs." Beatrice invited them both in, suddenly aware of how intimate the small cottage felt with Russell's tall frame filling the space. "I brought some books I thought you might enjoy," he said, setting the stack on her small table. "And these." From his jacket, he produced a small bouquet of late wildflowers, their colors vibrant against the fading season. "They're beautiful," Beatrice said, genuinely touched. She placed them in a jar of water, arranging them carefully. "No one has given me flowers before." Russell looked surprised. "Not even in Boston," she shook her head. "The men I knew there were more concerned with social connections than personal gestures." She smiled at him. "I much prefer wildflowers to formal calling cards." They settled into a comfortable conversation. Discussing the books, he'd brought a mix of Western adventures, historical accounts of the region, and several volumes of poetry. Russell surprised her with his knowledge of literature, quoting Tennyson and Wordsworth with the same ease he might discuss cattle breeding. "My mother's influence," he explained when she commented on it. "She believed being a rancher didn't mean being uncultured. Said the beauty of poetry helped her see the beauty in this landscape, even during the hardest times." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. His eyes grew distant with memory. "Would have liked you, I think. She valued education, independence of mind. Always said the West needed more women with backbones of steel and hearts full of compassion." "And is that how you see me?" Beatrice asked, curious. Russell's gaze returned to her, warm and direct. "From the moment I saw you at the depot, standing there alone, disappointed but not defeated." "Already thinking about what to do next?" He leaned forward slightly. "Most women in your position would have been in tears, looking for someone to solve their problems. You were solving them yourself." His perception was startlingly accurate. "I've had practice being self-reliant," she said simply. Their conversation continued as darkness fell, requiring the lighting of lamps. They discovered shared tastes in literature, similar views on education, and a mutual love of music. Russell spoke of his hopes for the ranch, his plans to introduce new breeding stock in the spring. Beatrice shared her vision for the school, her desire to create not just educated students but thoughtful citizens. When the mantel clock struck 10, Russell looked surprised. "I've stayed too long. People will talk." Beatrice smiled. "They're probably already talking. Small towns run on gossip, as I'm quickly learning." "Does that bother you?" he asked, his expression suddenly serious. "Your reputation as the school teacher is important," she finished for him. "But I'm not ashamed of enjoying the company of a respected rancher who serves on the town council." Her smile turned teasing. "Besides, General is our chaperone, aren't you, boy?" The dog thumped his tail in agreement, making them both laugh. At the door, Russell hesitated. "May I call on you again? Perhaps take you for a ride this weekend, show you more of the area." "I'd enjoy that very much." This time, his goodnight was marked by a gentle taking of her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a gesture both respectful and intimate. "Good night, Beatrice." "Good night, Russell." She watched from the window as man and dog disappeared into the darkness, heading back toward town before the long ride to the ranch. Something was growing between them, something precious and unexpected. Beatrice touched the wildflowers on her table and smiled, grateful for stage coaches that ran late and mail-order brides who were left at depots. The weeks that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Beatrice threw herself into teaching, finding joy in her students' progress and the challenges of tailoring education to such diverse needs and abilities. Her evenings and weekends, once filled with loneliness in Boston, now overflowed with community involvement and, increasingly, Russell's company. True to his word, he courted her properly. Saturday rides to show her the beauty of the surrounding landscape. Sunday dinners at the ranch with Amelia and Will. Tuesday evening visits to her cottage, always with General as their nominal chaperone. Occasionally, they attended community gatherings, together harvest celebrations, musical evenings at the church, a quilting bee where Russell good-naturedly endured teasing about being the only man present. October painted the landscape in brilliant colors before giving way to November's starker beauty. As temperatures dropped, Russell began bringing firewood for her cottage, showing her how to bank the coals at night for maximum warmth. These practical kindnesses touched Beatrice as deeply as the books and wildflowers he still brought regularly. Their relationship deepened through these shared moments and conversations. Beatrice learned about the challenges Russell faced as a rancher: the harsh winters, unpredictable markets, and constant work. He listened to her frustrations and triumphs with the school, offering suggestions when asked, but mostly providing steadfast support for her methods. Physical expressions remained modest hand-holding, occasional kisses on cheeks or foreheads, a lingering embrace when saying goodnight. Yet Beatrice found herself increasingly aware of Russell in ways that made her blush when alone. The strength in his hands when he helped her onto his horse. The way his shirt stretched across broad shoulders as he chopped wood. The tenderness in his eyes when he looked at her, thinking she wouldn't notice. By Thanksgiving, the entire town seemed to have accepted them as a couple. Invitations came addressed to both of them. Children at school sometimes slipped and called her Mrs. Nichols instead of Miss Calloway, causing good-natured teasing among the older students. Beatrice found herself wondering where their relationship was heading, yet reluctant to press for definitions. Their connection had grown naturally, without artificial constraints or expectations. There was a freedom in this Western approach to courtship that appealed to her independent nature. The first heavy snow came in early December, transforming La Veta into a winter wonderland. School continued, with students arriving bundled in layers, cheeks red from the cold. Beatrice organized a Christmas pageant that had the entire town talking, with every child given a meaningful part regardless of age or ability. One evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal with overexcited children, Beatrice returned to her cottage to find Russell waiting, General enthusiastically clearing a path through the snow with his body. "I thought you might need this," Russell said, holding up a thermos. Amelia's hot chocolate with a splash of something stronger. Beatrice laughed, ushering them inside out of the cold. "You're a mind reader." The children were absolutely wild today. I think the excitement of Christmas has them all beside themselves. They settled before the fire Russell quickly built up, sipping the warming drink and discussing the day's events. There was an easy domesticity to these moments that Beatrice treasured: the comfortable silences, the shared observations, the feeling of being truly known and accepted. "I have something for you," Russell said after a while, reaching into his coat pocket. "An early Christmas gift of sorts." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with a simple red ribbon. Beatrice opened it carefully to reveal a beautifully crafted leather-bound journal, her initials stamped in gold on the cover. "Russell, it's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the soft leather. "I noticed you writing in that paper notebook, the one that's falling apart," he explained. "Thought you might like something more substantial for your thoughts." The thoughtfulness of the gift brought unexpected tears to her eyes. It wasn't an extravagant or showy present, but one that recognized who she was and what mattered to her. "Thank you," she said softly, meeting his gaze across the small space between them. "For seeing me." Something shifted in Russell's expression, a deepening of emotion that made her breath catch. He moved from his chair to kneel beside hers, taking her hands in his. "Beatrice," he began, his voice husky with feeling. "I know it hasn't been that long since you arrived in La Veta. Maybe what I'm about to say is too soon." He took a deep breath. "But I've never been more certain of anything in my life than I am of my feelings for you." Her heart hammered in her chest. "Russell, let me finish, please." His thumbs traced circles on her palms. "That day at the depot, when I said you were meant to meet me instead, I had no idea how true those words would prove to be. You've brought something to my life I didn't even know was missing: purpose beyond work, joy beyond duty." His eyes held hers, vulnerable yet certain. "I love you, Beatrice Calloway, completely and without reservation." The words she'd been guarding in her own heart these past weeks spilled out naturally. "I love you too, Russell, so much more than I thought possible in such a short time." The smile that illuminated his face could have melted all the snow in Colorado. He rose slightly, still kneeling before her, and cupped her face in his hands. "May I kiss you? Properly this time?" Beatrice nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. Russell leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that began tenderly but quickly deepened with shared feeling. His arms encircled her, drawing her gently from the chair until they were both kneeling before the fire, embracing as if they'd found in each other something long sought. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Russell rested his forehead against hers. "I want to ask you to marry me," he whispered. "But I don't want you to think I'm rushing you, or that I expect you to give up your independence or your teaching." Beatrice placed her fingers against his lips, stopping his words. "Russell Nichols, are you proposing to me?" His smile was crooked, endearingly uncertain for a man usually so confident. "I'm trying to, if I can stop tripping over my own words." She laughed softly. "Then ask properly so I can answer properly." Russell took her hands again, his expression growing serious. "Beatrice Calloway, I love you. I want to build a life with you, equal partners, sharing work and dreams and whatever the future brings. Will you marry me?" Joy bubbled up inside her, pure and sweet. "Yes, Russell. Yes, I will marry you." This time when they kissed, it held all the promise of their shared future, tender yet passionate, a meeting of hearts as well as lips. General, who had been watching their exchange with canine interest, apparently decided the matter was settled and flopped down with a contented sigh, making them both laugh against each other's mouths. "I think we have his approval," Russell murmured, his arms still around her. "Essential in any good marriage," Beatrice agreed, her eyes dancing with happiness. They spent the evening planning not just a wedding but a life together. Russell assured her that the ranch house had plenty of room for her books and personal belongings. They would need to hire someone to take over the school eventually, but not immediately if Beatrice wished to finish the term. "And in the summers, you could still teach," Russell suggested. "Special classes for those who want to learn more or for adults in the community." His support for her vocation touched her deeply. This was not a man who saw marriage as ownership or expected his wife to abandon her own interests for his. "What about children?" Beatrice asked, the practical side of her mind considering all aspects of their future. Russell's expression softened. "I'd like children if you would, a family." He squeezed her hands. "But there's no rush for any of it. We have time to figure out how to balance everything." As the evening grew late, Russell reluctantly prepared to leave. The snow was falling heavily now, promising a difficult ride back to the ranch. "Stay at the boarding house tonight," Beatrice urged. "It's too dangerous to ride all the way back in this weather." "Trying to protect my virtue," he teased, though he nodded agreement. "Protecting the man I love from freezing to death before he can become my husband." she retorted with a smile. At the door, their goodnight kiss lingered, both reluctant to part even for one night. When? Russell asked simply. Christmas Eve, Beatrice decided. If that's not too soon. It would be a wonderful gift to begin the new year as husband and wife. Christmas Eve it is. Russell kissed her once more, then disappeared into the swirling snow, General bounding ahead to clear a path. Beatrice closed the door and leaned against it, happiness filling her like light. From abandoned bride to beloved fiancé in just 3 months' life had a way of offering unexpected gifts to those brave enough to accept them. The news of their engagement spread through La Veta with predictable speed. By noon the next day, Beatrice had received congratulations from half the town, including an effusive visit from Mayor Patterson, who declared it the most fortuitous union imaginable for our community's future development and cultural advancement. Amelia's reaction was more personal and touching. She arrived at the school after dismissal, enveloping Beatrice in a warm embrace. "Welcome to the family officially," she said, tears of joy in her eyes. "I've never seen my brother so happy." "He makes me happy too," Beatrice replied simply. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." "I brought something for you," Amelia said, producing a small box. Inside was a delicate silver locket on a chain. "It was our mother's. Russell asked me to give it to you. She would have wanted you to have it." The gesture brought tears to Beatrice's eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered, touching the locket gently. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely sure," Amelia affirmed. "You're exactly the kind of woman our mother hoped Russell would find someday, strong, independent, kind." She helped Beatrice fasten the locket around her neck. "Besides, now you have something old for your wedding day." The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation, not just for the wedding, but for the Christmas pageant and end-of-term school activities. Russell rode into town whenever weather permitted, sometimes staying overnight at the boarding house when snow made the return journey treacherous. These enforced separations only deepened their appreciation for their time together. Each reunion, even after just a day or two apart, brought the joy of rediscovery and strengthened their certainty about the life they were choosing to build together. Christmas Eve arrived clear and cold, the snow glistening under a bright winter sun. The church was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons, candles ready to be lit for the evening service that would precede the wedding. Beatrice prepared in Amelia's room at the boarding house, where she had stayed the previous night in accordance with tradition. Her wedding dress was simple but elegant ivory satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs, sewn by the women of La Veta who had embraced her as one of their own. "Something borrowed," Amelia said, placing a pearl comb in Beatrice's upswept hair. "From Flora at the general store." "Something blue," added young Emily Wilson, who had become one of Beatrice's favorite students. She presented a blue ribbon that had been embroidered with tiny flowers. "I made it myself for your bouquet." "And something new," said Mrs. Miller, producing a pair of soft leather gloves. "From all of us at the sewing circle. Winters are cold here, especially riding between town and the ranch." Tears threatened to ruin the careful application of rouge Amelia had insisted upon. "Thank you all," Beatrice said, deeply moved by the community's embrace. "I never expected to find such friendship here." "You've given as much as you've received," Mrs. Miller assured her. "Our children love you, and you've brought Russell Nichols out of that self-imposed isolation he's been in since his parents died. That alone would earn you our gratitude." As twilight gathered, the church bells began to ring, calling the community to the Christmas Eve service. Beatrice remained at the boarding house, according to plan, waiting until the service was underway before making her entrance. Will, dressed in his Sunday best, came to escort her. "Uncle Russell sent me," he explained importantly. "He said to tell you he's waiting and that he's the luckiest man in Colorado." The walk to the church through freshly fallen snow was like a scene from a fairy tale, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky and lamplight glowing from windows along the way. Will chattered excitedly about the surprise Russell had prepared at the ranch for after the wedding, a detail he wasn't supposed to reveal but couldn't contain. "It's a new bookshelf, built special for your books," he confided. "And he fixed up the small room off the main bedroom for your writing and schoolwork. Says a teacher needs her own space." Beatrice's heart swelled with love for the man who understood her so completely. When they reached the church steps, Will squeezed her hand. "You look beautiful, Miss Calloway. But soon you'll be Aunt Beatrice instead." The title clearly pleased him. "I'm looking forward to that very much," she told him sincerely. The church doors opened at their approach. The Christmas service was concluding, the final carol fading as Beatrice stood in the doorway. Every head turned, conversations hushing as the congregation saw her framed in the entrance, illuminated by candlelight. But Beatrice had eyes only for Russell, standing at the altar beside Reverend Thomas. He was dressed in a new suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his expression transforming from nervous anticipation to awestruck wonder as he saw her. With steady steps, Beatrice walked down the aisle alone. She had no family to give her away, no father to escort her. Yet she felt anything but lonely as she moved through the gathered community that had become her extended family in such a short time. When she reached Russell, he extended his hands to take hers. "You're beautiful," he whispered for her ears alone. "So are you," she whispered back, making him smile. The ceremony itself was brief but deeply meaningful. They exchanged traditional vows, promising to love and honor each other through all of life's joys and challenges. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Russell's kiss was tender yet filled with promise, appropriate for a church setting while hinting at deeper passion to come. The congregation erupted in applause and cheers. What followed was a joyous celebration combining Christmas festivities and wedding merriment. The town hall had been transformed with decorations, tables laden with food contributed by every family, and music provided by local musicians, including Russell himself, who played several tunes on his fiddle to the delight of all. As midnight approached, Russell found Beatrice among the well-wishers and drew her aside. "Ready to go home, Mrs. Nichols?" he asked, his voice low and intimate. The new name sent a thrill through her. "Yes, Mr. Nichols, I believe I am." They said their goodbyes amid good-natured teasing, and made their way to the sleigh Russell had prepared, decorated with evergreen boughs and small bells that jingled merrily as they set off toward the ranch toward home. The journey through the starlit night was magical, with the moon casting blue shadows across the snow-covered landscape. They talked and laughed, sharing observations about the wedding and their guests, comfortable together even in this new status as husband and wife. At the ranch, Russell insisted on carrying Beatrice across the threshold in traditional fashion. General greeted them with enthusiastic barking, clearly happy to have them home. The house was warm and welcoming, with fires burning in the main room and bedroom fireplaces. As Will had revealed, a new bookshelf stood waiting for Beatrice's collection, and the small adjoining room had been transformed into a study space with a desk, comfortable chair, and good lighting. "You like it?" Russell asked, suddenly uncertain as she explored the space. "I love it," Beatrice assured him, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "You've made a place for me that honors who I am. That's what I wanted." He took her hands in his. "This is your home now, not just mine. It should reflect both of us." In the bedroom, Beatrice found another surprise: a new quilt on the large four-poster bed, clearly handmade with intricate stitching. "Amelia and the ladies of the quilting circle," Russell explained. "They've been working on it in secret for weeks." The pattern, Beatrice realized with emotion, incorporated elements that represented both of them: books and stars, mountains and flowers, all woven together into a harmonious whole, like their lives now joined as one. A certain shyness fell between them then, the reality of their new intimacy suddenly present. Russell moved to add wood to the fire, giving Beatrice a moment to compose herself. "I'll step out while you prepare for bed," he offered, his consideration evident even in this most personal of moments. When he returned, Beatrice was sitting on the edge of the bed in her nightgown, hair loose around her shoulders. The nervousness she had expected to feel was tempered by the depth of trust and love that had grown between them over these months. Russell had changed as well, wearing only a nightshirt and trousers. He sat beside her on the bed, taking her hand in his. "I want you to know," he said softly, "that there's no rush for anything, tonight or any night." His sensitivity touched her deeply. "I'm not afraid," she told him honestly. "Not with you." Their kiss began gently, a continuation of the hundreds they had shared during their courtship. But here, in the privacy of their bedroom with no need for restraint or propriety, it deepened into something more primal, more honest. Russell's hands tangled in her hair as Beatrice's arms encircled his neck, drawing him closer. What followed was a discovery of each other that transcended physical union, though that too was beautiful in its passion and tenderness. It was the culmination of a journey that had begun with two strangers meeting at a depot and recognizing in each other something essential and true. Afterward, lying in each other's arms beneath the new quilt, Beatrice marveled at the path that had brought her here. "If Harold Fitzgerald hadn't abandoned his promises," she murmured against Russell's chest, "I would never have found you." Russell's arm tightened around her. "I'm almost tempted to thank the scoundrel," he said, pressing a kiss to her hair. "But mostly I'm just grateful that you were brave enough to come west at all, and that you happened to be at the depot that day." "Not happened," he corrected gently. "Remember what I said, you were meant to meet me instead." Beatrice smiled in the darkness, contentment filling her soul. "Yes," she agreed. "I believe we were." Spring came early to La Veta in 1879, bringing with it new beginnings. Beatrice continued teaching through the remainder of the school term, riding to and from the ranch each day on a gentle mare Russell had trained specifically for her. The community quickly adapted to their new arrangement, with parents sometimes stopping by the ranch with questions about their children's education, or to drop off assignments for students too ill to attend school. By summer, Beatrice had settled fully into life as Mrs. Nichols. She maintained her independence while embracing the partnership of marriage, helping with ranch work when needed while continuing to nurture her own interests and pursuits. Russell kept his promise to support her teaching, building a small library in town that doubled as a summer schoolroom for advanced students and adult education classes. Their life together wasn't without challenges. The harsh realities of ranching in the West meant occasional financial worries, difficult decisions about livestock and land management, and the physical dangers inherent in the work. But they faced each challenge together, strengthened by the trust and communication that had been the foundation of their relationship from the beginning. In August, as the first anniversary of Beatrice's arrival in La Veta approached, she shared news that brought fresh joy to their household. They would welcome a child in the early spring. Russell's reaction, a mixture of awe, excitement, and tender concern for her well-being, only deepened her conviction that fate had indeed led her to exactly where she was meant to be. On a warm evening in late September, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sunset paint the mountains in hues of gold and purple. Russell's arm rested comfortably around Beatrice's shoulders, his hand occasionally drifting to the slight curve of her belly where their child grew. "You ever wonder," Beatrice asked, "what became of Harold Fitzgerald?" Russell considered the question. "Sometimes." Last I heard, the gold claim in Nevada didn't pan out. He moved on to California, I believe. I hope he found whatever he was looking for, she said, surprising herself with the sincerity of the sentiment. Generous of you, considering, Russell noted. Beatrice smiled, placing her hand over his. How can I feel anything but gratitude? His absence gave me everything. She gestured to the home they had built together, both the physical structure and the life it contained. Sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as disappointments. Russell turned to face her, his gray eyes reflecting the last light of day. I knew it from the first moment I saw you, he said, his voice husky with emotion. Standing there alone at the depot, disappointed but not broken. I knew you were something special, someone I wanted to know. He placed his hand against her cheek. I just never imagined how completely you would change my life. For the better, I hope, she teased gently, in every possible way. His kiss was tender, a reaffirmation of all they had built together. I love you, Beatrice Nichols. And I love you, Russell Nichols. She rested her head against his shoulder as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. More than I ever thought possible when I stepped off that stagecoach. As night fell over the Colorado mountains, enveloping the ranch in peaceful darkness, Beatrice reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the disappointment of being left at the depot to the joy of building a life with the man who had been waiting there instead. Not the life she had planned, but infinitely more rewarding than anything she could have imagined. Sometimes, she thought as Russell's arm tightened around her, the most beautiful love stories begin with the words, "You were meant to meet me instead."